lot of fever blisters that came up, and I know that's grotesque to look at, but hopefully they're actually better now, and so maybe it won't be too bad too much of a distraction. Glad Lee can be with us. I know she doesn't feel as well as she would like, but at least she's well enough to be here, and that's a big thing. Let's go ahead and begin with our Bible readings. For today, we had Numbers 26 through 34. That's Numbers 53 through 56 on our Bible reading chart. 26 through 34. I want to remember the three major divisions of Numbers. We have the former generation, the generation that saw all the plagues that came out, that received the law. And that goes down to chapter 10, about verse 9 or 10. And they are still at Mount Sinai, and all of those chapters of the first 10 show the preparation for leaving Sinai, the numbering. Do you remember offhand how many were numbered? Numbers 145 and 6, the number of men 20 years of age and above, able to bear arms and go to war.
603,000.
550, good, 550, specifically mentioned. And that didn't include the women and children, so that's how we get an estimate of 3-4 million people that the nation probably consisted of by that time. So chapter 1 through 10, verse 10 is that old generation. And then the transition, 10 verse 11 through chapter 21, that deals with their leaving Mount Sinai. They begin murmuring, Kirjath, Hatava, you just name the place, one murmuring after another, this judgment sent. And then they come in 13 to Kadesh Barnea, send out the spies. They return after how many days? 40, with 10 of the 12, an evil report. We can't take the land. And so God's judgment was, for every day you're gone, there's going to be a year that you're going to wander. So really from chapters 14 through about 20, we have their wandering in the wilderness, and eventually they come to the land of Moab. And they conquer during this time what we sometimes call the Transjordanic. They make the Transjordanic, trans meaning across the Jordan River. And so you have Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. And they actually conquer that land. And there's some idea, we'll just stay over here. Moses said, if you don't go over and help the rest of us, you just need to know that your sins will find you out. And so they agreed to go and conquer the rest of the land. So in 22 through 26, we have the new generation, the attempts of the Moabites and the Midianites to destroy Israel by somebody's cursing. Who was it? Starts with a B. Balaam. Yeah, Balaam's curse. And the curses that he tried to curse Israel with were actually turned into what? Blessings. And there were some elements of prophecy in that. In chapter 20, we're 26 through 34. 25, the sin at Baal Peor. And then in 26, the people are, what happened to them again? They're numbered. In the second numbering, there's 601,730. Good. And then chapter 27 has law relative to the inheritance of property by various daughters. And then there's appointment of somebody to lead the people after Moses. Who is it? Joshua. Good. And then in 28, 29, and 30, there are laws relative to various offerings, offerings on the Sabbath and the feast days. In 29, the very first verse gives you a hint. It's what month? The seventh month. And you had the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Tabernacle. Look at verse 7. On the 10th day of this 7th, you shall have a holy convocation or meeting. It's the Day of Atonement. The 15th day, a holy convocation. That's down in verse 12. So that continues on in chapter 29. And in 30, there's a law concerning what? Vows. Verse 2 is a key to that chapter. In 31, the various ones are annihilated. They're slaughtered. Who are they? The Midianites. Exactly right. Defeated them, and the division of the land conquered on the east side of the Jordan is given. And then 32, what happens here? Reuben, Gad, and half tribe of Manasseh, what's done there? They settle their land. That's right, the Transjordanic tribes. And then in 33, we have really a listing of verse 2. It really is a key to that. In 2 and 3, Moses wrote there what?
Starting places.
That's right.
Stage.
Exactly, the journeying up to that point. And then in the last chapter, we look at what happens in 34.
Start setting borders and boundaries.
Exactly. The borders, the boundaries are given. And then in 35, we'll get to that Wednesday, but the cities of refuge are given. It's interesting that the cities of refuge were cities where people who had done what could go? Yeah, what we would call as involuntary manslaughter. And they could go and flee for refuge. And there's a picture there of Jesus and foreshadowing that we violate, we've sinned, and then here's a place we can go for safety. And they were scattered. The cities of refuge were scattered so that people, regardless of what side of the Jordan you lived on, you would have a place to go. All right, enough on that for right now. And let's go ahead with our study. We are in the 11th chapter of Matthew and the 7th chapter of Luke. And if you have your Waldron material with you, then it would put you at really page. Is this yours, Lee? Yeah, that's yours. No wonder I couldn't say. I was like, where's mine? It's right here in front of me. You didn't have your page numbered. If you look at page number 47, are you numbering your pages? You know they're not numbered. 47 is the one that has the modern village of Nain down here on the left-hand column. That's what I count as page 47. That was just a major boo-boo by Truth Books when they just failed to, some proofer, some editor failed miserably in the job because when we called about it, they said, no, it can't be. And they looked at them and said, yeah, you're right. How did we do that? I don't know how many thousands of these they published. And no page numbers. And yet they refer to page numbers. When the Waldrons published these books, I think I told you about this earlier, when they published these books on their own, in fact, the copyright and the publishing was 108 French Way. That's where the preacher's house was up in Athens. And they had everything just exactly right. And they turn over the rights to and it goes downhill. More pictures, but substance, I know if Bob were able to, bless his heart, if he were able to think like he could, he would be so disappointed in the way they did this. It's not good.
Billy, what number did you say the page was?
I've got 47 is where the message from John the Baptist, Jesus praises John. That's on the right-hand column of the left page. Do y'all have that? That's what you've got, Lindsay? Okay. Lindsay's got it, so it's got to be right. All right. So we now let's go back. We're on Jonathan. We're on 12. I think I told Charlie that. All right. Now we've had the years of preparation, about 30, and then the beginning ministry begins. Always remember with what event? Jesus' baptism, when God declares, "This is my beloved Son, this in whom I'm well pleased." And so then he goes into the wilderness, is tempted, and the events in John 1, 2, 3, then in 4, because Pharisees are understanding he's baptizing more disciples, he needs to get out. Also, John has been up in Enon near Salem baptizing there, but he was in prison, taken down to Machaerus. And so there's a left of this vacuum up in Samaria. So Jesus needs to go northward, which he does. And so we have the conversation with the woman at the well at Sychar. Goes up, he goes to Cana, where he heals the nobleman's son over at Capernaum. Goes to Nazareth, then up to Capernaum, and makes that his home city. And let's see. Let me fast forward through this. Jonathan, don't worry about this. I wanted to come here, right here. This is what I've been eliminating down to about here. He calls the 4 disciples to follow him, teaches in the synagogue, heals a demoniac, heals Peter's mother-in-law, preaches, heals in Galilee, heals a leper, heals a paralytic, calls Matthew or Levi. Then Levi makes a feast for him, and that will come into play in our study in just a moment. Levi makes a feast for him, and then the disciples of John come and say, why are we feasting and your disciples are fasting? And then he heals a lame man on the Sabbath, plucks grain of corn or wheat on the Sabbath, heals a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. All of those Sabbath day violations according to not the law, but the traditions of the Pharisees, traditions of the elders. He withdraws from his enemies because they after he healed the man with a withered hand, and he, is it right to do good on the Sabbath or not? And they could not. It's kind of like Stephen. When you cannot withstand the wisdom and the power by which he spoke, instead of dealing with the message, what do? Get rid of the messenger. Get rid of the messenger. And we just don't want to hear that. So instead of arguing with him and trying to reason, just get rid of him. And so that's what they did. And rather than protest, he withdrew from his enemies, which was a fulfillment of Isaiah. And then after a night of prayer, he selects the 12 apostles. And then we have the Sermon on the Mount. And then in these stories that are only recorded in Matthew and Luke, the centurion servant, what's special about him? He was a Roman, obviously a Roman soldier, a Gentile, and without replaying all of that, he sent elders of the Jews, then special servants, and he says, I'm not worthy for you to do what? Come in my house. And I'm not really worthy to come to you, but all you need to do is speak the word, and my servant will be healed. In Jesus, one of the few compliments Jesus gives in the New Testament. I have not seen so great faith, no, not in Israel. And so he compliments the centurion. Then he raises the widow's son at Nain. And then where we are right now, John sends a couple of disciples and said, are you the one, or should we what? Look for another. Jonathan, let's go back to slide number 12. So what we have here then in this estimate of John, it follows in Luke's account as well. And we've already talked about some of it. 3 explanations, as we talked about this Wednesday night. And then the second thing, as great as John was, he says, of men born of women, there's not a greater than John the Baptist, but he that is least in the kingdom is greater than he. So, possibly prophetically pictured in Zechariah 12, where people in the new kingdom would be greater than David. There's a similar idea. Also taught is the kingdom was not then in existence, it was future. And second, that John was not in the kingdom himself. And neither Jesus nor John pleased all the people, and even fewer to none of the religious leaders. Let's Richard, what number did we get to? You weren't here Wednesday night, were you? Sister Eleanor, do you remember where we got to? What, or anybody else? What number we got to on our questions?
I think on page 60 is what I've got marked.
Okay, all right, good. All right, let's look at the text itself for just a moment. Look at the text itself, and I want us to go back to So go to Matthew's account, Matthew 11, just for a moment. Matthew 11. We'll leave. Luke does not include everything Matthew does here, at least afterward, before we get to the next major event. All right, the servants have come to Jesus to ask him, in behalf of John, are you the Messiah, or should we look for another? Jesus tells them, basically, tell them everything I've been doing, the miracles I've been accomplishing, and the gospel is preached to the poor, and blessed is he who finds no occasion of stumbling in me. So in verse 7, this is Matthew 11, 7 through 19, is Jesus' estimate of John. Did you think when you went out to see John that you were seeing a man clothed in soft garments? The word soft there comes the same word that we get in 1 Corinthians 6, effeminate. They're just soft. And here's a person who's not working. He's of the nobility and all that. Do you think that's what you want? Or did you go out to, what do you think you'd see? Not only a person like that, a reed shaken with the wind, verse 7. And I tell you, he's much more than a prophet. And then he's the object of prophecy, verse 10. I send my messenger before thy face. That's quoted from what? Malachi 3, verse 1. And so John himself was the subject of prophecy, and some of the teaching that he would do had been prophesied as well. Turn the hearts of the last couple of verses of Malachi. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the children to the fathers. And so then our verse, let's just keep reading. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, there hath not arisen a greater than John the Baptist. Yet he that is belittled in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and men of violence take it by force. And we answered that Wednesday night. This is seen so vividly in John 6, about verse 15, where after Jesus had after he had fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, they sought to take him by force and make him a what? Make him a king. Wrong kind of king. Jesus didn't come to establish that kind of a kingdom. And I think that's what Jesus has reference to here. They're trying to take him and be the political, military leader they wanted in order to release themselves or relieve themselves from the political thumb of the Romans. And so he said, men of violence take it by force. Verse 13, for all the prophets in the law prophesied till John. And if you're willing to receive it, this is Elijah that is to come. And we drew on the board, Elijah to come, and then ... all the way down here, here's Jesus. And Jesus said, this, that is John, is the Elijah who is to come. Not that he is to come from the point of view where Jesus was, but he was to come from the point of where Malachi was. He was in future for Malachi, and that's what Jesus is referring back to. So he is the Elijah. And we pointed out, I think earlier in Luke's account, when Gabriel appeared to Zacharias and said that Elizabeth, your wife, is going to have a son, he will be in the Spirit. He will come in the Spirit and power of Elijah. Right. So this is Elijah to come. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Verse 16. 16 through 19, Jesus has an illustration that has 2 parts. And the illustration is children in a marketplace. And they're doing 2 things. One is they're playing some translations say a flute, kind of like a pipe instrument, woodwind, I guess it would be, landed. They're playing this little pipe instrument, and as they're playing, and all the little kids are supposed to be doing what? Dancing, having a good time. There's happiness and joy is the idea. On the other hand, there's some children who they're as it were the professional wailers, W-A-I-L, not H-A-L-E-R, but they're wailing, and others taking their lead are supposed to do what? Mourn with them. And so you get the picture. Jesus is like the ones that, John, first of all, he comes and he says, repent or perish, turn or burn. and he's living an austere life. Locusts and wild honey is his food, a leather garment about his loins, and so it's this tough, austere life. Jesus comes. Furthermore, he's preaching out in the wilderness of Judea. He's out there. Jesus, on the other hand, is coming. He's not living. One other thing I forgot offhand. John was a what from birth? Starts with an N. A Nazarite. And so a Nazarite lived this more of an abstinent life from, grapes and other things like that. And so Jesus is not a Nazarite. He's going among the sinners, the publicans. He's talking with them. He's feasting with them. And so there are two different fields of service, if you please. And yet both of them were according to God's wisdom. True or false? Exactly. So they had different missions. And so with that in mind, let's read it. For John came neither eating... verse 16. Whereunto shall I liken this generation? It's likened to children sitting in the marketplaces who called to their fellows and said, we piped unto you. What's yours say, Landon? Played the flute?
We played the flute.
Yeah. We played the flute and you didn't do what?
Dance.
You didn't dance. We wailed and you did not do what? You didn't mourn. And then he fills in the blanks as to what he was illustrating. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they said he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they said, behold, a gluttonous man, wine-bibber, friend of publicans and sinners. And then he said, wisdom is justified by her works. The marginal reading will have children, and children is a textual rendering in Luke's account. So wisdom is justified by her works. So Jesus basically says, look, we came... Let's go back to the first of Matthew 11. John sends out the deputation. Are you the one, or should we look for another? Jesus answers, look at the miracles I'm doing, those to whom I preach the gospel. And so evidently there were some who didn't have the right disposition toward John that they should. So Jesus says, let me tell you about John. He is one great man. In fact, there's not arisen a greater than John who's been born among women. But he who is least in the kingdom is greater than he. John didn't please you. I don't please you. And yet what both of us are doing is actually a part of the wisdom of God. Wisdom is justified by her works. Wisdom is the reverse personification of God. God and the children would be the servants of God. But wisdom is put for God. So it's, sometimes we say personification is taking an inanimate object and ascribing to it personality. Well, here it's just the reverse of that. You take wisdom is put in the place for God. Wisdom, God's wisdom, is justified or vindicated by her children, by her works. John and Jesus would be the children of wisdom. And though both were doing different works, they both vindicated the fact that God's wisdom was exactly what needed to be done at that time. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's finish up answering these questions before we get in 20. You said it was what, Sister Eleanor? J?
M on page 60.
M, okay. M on page 60. Jesus reproves the inconsistency of childish hearers in Matthew 11, also Luke 7. Neither he nor John would satisfy what they wanted. To what does Jesus compare that generation in doing? Well, we've already, Brother Farron, what do you have on that?
I said that they were like children complaining and couldn't be pleased no matter what.
Exactly. Children in a marketplace playing would not be pleased. You look at Matthew 11 in one sense. The chapter is about the fact that neither John nor Jesus pleased the multitudes, or pleased the people, the Jews, particularly religious leaders. Jesus applies the comparison in 18 and 19. Those dissatisfied Jews were the pouting children. The two who did not go along with them, did not try to please them, were who? John and Jesus, yeah. Practically all of Matthew 11 shows that neither Jesus nor John pleased the people. They couldn't be satisfied. What did they say John had? A demon. What did they say was wrong with Jesus?
He was a glutton, a wine bibber.
Yeah, he ate, drank, a gluttonous man, wine bibber, and friend of tax collectors and sinners. Now, the follow-up on Q. Was Jesus actually a drunk, gluttonous wine bibber, or what? Was Jesus a gluttonous man? Was he a wine bibber? That is, sot drunk? No, obviously not. Was he a friend of publicans and sinners? Yes. And there is a powerful, powerful lesson here, and I tried to make some of it in the note. Because an accusation is made against someone does not prove the person's guilt. Often when people hate another, they will take some things he has done or said, twist them a little, and insinuate the worst possible motives. That was done to Jesus. So the idea of his being a gluttonous man, a wine bibber, that's out of question. The fact is, though, he did go to the feasts. That, in fact, we'll see in Luke 7, after this event, there will be a feast made or supper made by Simon the Pharisee, and he goes to it. And where you see John is out in the wilderness, Jesus is going among the people and doing his business. And so they're taking some things that he did and attributing a lot of other things that weren't true to try to discredit him. Okay. Next page. To what could they possibly, we'll just answer that. To what could they possibly have referred when condemning Jesus of being a friend of publicans and sinners? What was that?
He called Matthew.
That's right. He called Matthew, and Matthew made a feast for him. Notice the last phrase in 19. The people were not happy with John or with Jesus, but both of them in their conduct were what? Justified by their children or actions or their works as pleasing God. Essentially, God's plan or wisdom not to please men was justified by the way things turned out. All right, I wanted to look at this third point I had. Is not in the notes in so many words. I kind of reworded it. When I started being a little more serious about Bible study, that phrase right here, and wisdom is justified by her children, and then the wisdom is justified by her works. There's a question on the manuscripts there, but really it's a Hebrew idiom, and either works or children would work in the explanation of it. Wisdom is justified by her works. Hebrew idiom, Jesus and John are pictured as children of wisdom. Wisdom, obviously, is the reversed personification of God's will. And so wisdom, in his use of Jesus and John, was justified or vindicated in what wisdom's children did. That is, the lives they were living and the works that they worked. How matters worked out, what eventually leads to the whole scheme of redemption, vindicated their lives and their work. Though they were different and they behaved differently, both carried out exactly the Father's mission, which in this sense was his wisdom. Wisdom is justified by her works. There's an interesting little passage that I don't have on the notes here. If you look all the way to, I think I've got in notes on Luke, all the way back to Job 5, I believe it's Job 5. There's a little statement made here, and without putting it all in context. Look at verse 7, Job 5, verse 7. Read it, whoever has it, read it. Job 5, verse 7.
For a man is born of trouble, as sparks fly up.
As sparks fly upward. Do you have a marginal reading on that phrase, as sparks fly upward? Don't. There's no marginal reading. The American Standard has, for the little phrase that sparks fly upward, the sons of flame fly upward. The sparks, the sons of flame that come from the coal, as it were. And the man is born unto trouble, and here sparks come from the flame, the coal. They're called sons, and it just means something that grows out of this. So if you look back now to Matthew 11, the idea is what grows out of God's wisdom are the works of God and Jesus. What grows out of wisdom would be the children of wisdom in the sense of the people. It's just a Hebrew idiom. We have idiomatic expressions all over the place that we think about. Now, don't ask me to name one. But he was under the weather. Well, what does that mean? All of us are under the weather, aren't we? He's sick. Yeah. It's just another phrase for something else. He's a chip off the old block. He's like his parents, or she's like her parents, or mother, or so on. So we have all kinds of idioms. It's just a figure of speech that doesn't necessarily mean literally what it comes across as. I'll tell you another one is an idiomatic expression that the Sabbatarians like to use against truth is ton sabaton, isn't it, Lee? And Mark 16, verse 9, after the Sabbath was over. But that's not how it's translated. It's translated, and on the first day of the week. Well, guess what after the Sabbath was over means? It means the first day of the week. And a lot of these Seventh-day Adventists will try to hoodwink people and say, well, you don't even know what the Greek of Acts 20, verse 7 says. Upon the first day of the week when the disciples were after the Sabbath was over, is literally what but it was an idiom. It was a Greek idiom that meant, well, after the Sabbath day is another way of saying when the first day of the week came. And so I'm just saying, don't let people fool you into those phrases like that, kind of understood in the context, helps us. Comment or question? You look like you want to say something.
And that passage where he said they were singing and then they were mourning, it's like Jesus covered all the spectrum.
Exactly.
From it being totally, excited
Yes.
to mourning.
Yes.
We can't do anything for you.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what I do, what John did, neither one of us pleases you. Yeah. Okay. All right. We come to any comment or question? All right. Now, let's keep ourselves here in Matthew's account, because really it's only Luke does not record this part. All right, you've got people at this point in Jesus' life who have rejected John, they've rejected Jesus. Neither one pleased the people. All right, so in verse 20 through 24, he has this judgment pronounced against these cities wherein he had done so many mighty works. Woe unto thee, Chorazin! Woe unto thee, Bethsaida! And then woe unto thee, Capernaum! If the works were done in thee, and so here we go. Here on this mount, I've tried to emphasize, here's Capernaum, and he made that his what? His home city. And here's Chorazin, about 2 miles away, and Bethsaida was just a few miles from there. In fact, if you on a good location right over in Gergesa, you can look, a high area, you can look down and see all these areas where those cities are. We've shown some pictures of Capernaum already. I have a few pictures of what they think, was Bethsaida. And Chorazin, they're just some stones. You just can't really tell what was ever there. And so what happens is, let's look at the context. Here are people who say, is Jesus the real McCoy? Or should we look for, Jesus said, yeah, basically I am. This is what I've been doing. All right, I'm going to tell you really the value of John. And then he comes back and he pronounces this woes on these places where he had done so many wonderful miracles. Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum, in that order. And he compares them to these Old Testament cities, Tyre, Sidon, and Sodom. And if the works had been done that were done in Chorazin and Bethsaida, if they had been done in Tyre and Sidon would what? Still be here. And then it's almost like he says, in you, Capernaum, a city of comfort, located right there close to where the Jordan River or the springs empty into the Sea of Galilee, and the fresh water and a lot of fish and all that's just really a nice place to live. Thou Capernaum, do you think you're going to be exalted into heaven? I say no, you're going to be cast down into Hades. For if the works done in thee were done in Sodom, it would what? It would have remained unto this day. So what he says was, I have given you so many opportunities, and you've wasted them. And if Old Testament, these people in these cities who had less light, less information, if they had had what you had, they would have done a whole lot better. Which indicates that God's judgment will be to a degree based on the opportunities that we have. And so he goes, all right, so that's that paragraph. So we condemn different attitudes toward John, different attitudes toward Jesus, and then he's, woe on these cities who don't believe. But then in 25 through 27, in fact, he says, but I'm thankful. He's thankful that there were some who did what? Who did what? Believe. That's right, Farron. Who did believe on him. And then he says, and the only way they can believe on me is for me to reveal to them who the Father is. I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that thou didst hide these things from the wise and understanding, and didst reveal them unto babes, for so it was well-pleasing in thy sight. And then in verse 27, he says, all things have been delivered unto me of my Father. No one knows the Father save the Son. I'm sorry, I got it reversed. No one knows the Son except the Father. Neither does any know the Father save the Son. And he, to whomsoever the Son wills, to reveal him. And so that shows the only way they can ultimately know God is through Jesus Christ. We'll come to that in a second. And then in 28 through 30, all right, keep the context before you now. He said, all right, John didn't please you. Jesus didn't please you. I didn't please you, Jesus says. And I tell you, woe comes onto these people who don't believe me. But there are some who do. And Father, I thank you that there are those who have believed. They're not the wise. They're not the intelligentsia of our society. But they're babes. They're just, they see what it is, and they take it for what it is and believe on it. And then the truth of the matter is, I want everybody to come to me, but the only ones who really will. Come unto me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden. The ones who are, now that's just not everybody who has an 8-hour job. That's not what he's talking about. Who are laboring and under the heavy load of what? Sin. Has to be. Come unto me, all you who understand you need me. Come unto me, all ye that labor. You're working and are heavy laden. You're working under the load of sin, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, a device that couples two similar animals together for the purpose of what? Working. Work. Submission is the figurative use of it. So come unto me, all and take my yoke upon you, which involves and learn of me. And then the way I am, you need to become. For I am meek and lowly in heart. And as a result of your yoking yourself to me and becoming meek and lowly, you're going to find rest unto your souls. I think that's the best I can do in pulling it all together and say, okay, here are people. John, Jesus didn't please. And I tell you, these people who have all these wonderful experiences of the miracles, and they reject me, they're going to be cast down. And I'm thankful, Father, that the common people have heard me gladly. I'm thankful they believe. In fact, there's nobody can know who the Father is except what I delivered what I revealed. And in fact, I want everybody to come to me. That's the content. Isn't that beautiful? I revel in those passages. They show human nature for what it is. I thank thee, O Father, that thou didst hide these things from the wise and understanding. That doesn't mean if you have any sense you can't be a Christian. But if people who are lettered, they have a lot of sense, but that's where it stops. They have confidence only in their own reasoning ability. And if they can't reason through something, guess what? It just didn't happen. If they can't see, I can't see how a person could be raised from the dead, so it didn't happen. And they discount the objective truth of the gospel. And we've gotten some notes along those lines. Let's see if we can, is it 14 after already? I get wound up sometimes. Let's answer just 2 or 3 of these and we'll stop. All right, on number 4, on page 61, these verses record Jesus reproving unbelieving cities where he performed a number of miracles that would have convinced honest people he was God's son. In what 3 cities had Jesus done many of his mighty works? Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum. What 3 cities would have repented long ago had they seen as much light? Tyre, Sidon, and Sodom. And then I thought one reason I included that note is because I thought it was so good by McGarvey. Now, verse number C. The connection of what precedes to Matthew 11 seems to be what we already discussed. While many rejected him and the way he and John did things, Jesus is thankful for those who did believe on him, and he invites all to come to him. Does Matthew 11 mean no one who is wise or has any understanding may know about the Lord? No. Let's look at this one passage and we'll stop. 1 Corinthians 1 has the same Greek word for wise there, sophos, like sophistry, is the reasonableness of the idea of wisdom, is used all through chapter 1. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? That's verse 20. Seeing that the wisdom of God, you've got the wisdom of God versus the wisdom of man. And then in verse 26, he says, I just want you to look around at the consist of the church here at Corinth. Behold, look around. Behold your calling, brethren. Not many wise after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. God chose the foolish things of the world that he might put to shame them that are wise. The weak things of the world that he might put to shame things that are strong. And the reason for all this, if you drop on down, in verse 31, that according as it is written, he who glories, let him what? Glory in the Lord. So it's not a case of if you got any sense at all, you're never going to be a Christian. But the truth of the matter is, oftentimes, it says, behold your calling, not many, not every, but not many. The consist of most congregations is not of the highest intelligence always in the city. There's some. I mean, we have, all of you know about Kevin Clark, an attorney. There are not medical doctors in Birmingham who are members of the church. There are not a number of engineers. There are a lot of people who have sense, a lot of education, who understand that. But the chief point I take it is that when people use their intelligence and say that's all there is, what I've got is all there is to know, then they become in contrast to the babes, as he mentions here in Matthew 11, the people who just simply take things at face value. They see Jesus and his miracles and say, that he must be the son of David. Whereas I don't understand how that occurs, therefore he doesn't really do it. I just haven't figured it out yet. The wise and the intelligentsia of their day. Does that make sense to everybody? Anything, Linda, you would? Anybody? Okay, we'll have to stop and pick up there at the end of these questions, and we'll get, Lord willing, we'll get on into Luke 7 and the Jesus being at the house of Simon the Pharisee, and this sinful woman comes and anoints his feet, and with her tears, dries his feet with her hair. Somebody made a point in the Bible class, it's obvious she believed 1 Corinthians 11:14, that a woman's hair is a glory for her because she had it long enough for it to, go down and wipe his feet. All right, we will